you alluded to quite a few choices that you made, decisions which are important. Some of the tough choices that I saw or I heard about just now are to remain a product company and not a services company. And the and if we go back to circa 85, which is roughly when you started, that's when roughly when Infosys or quite a few of the Infosys, Wipro, quite a few of the services companies started then. And obviously taking 10, it was an arbitrage thing. It cost you $20 for a software engineer per hour and you sell for 70, and it was quite a tempting thing. That's just abroad. But even with your existing customer base, I'm sure you've got requests like, can you create inventory packages for me? Or can you charge me per annum but make those changes for me? What was the thought process in staying steadfast to the product line? And the real question here is, are there some lessons to be learned for the software industry in India in general? Because we're seeing quite a few services companies sprout up, but very few quality product companies come up in India. So, any thoughts?
I think we were exceptionally lucky early on to recognize the fundamental difference between a product and a service, and which is even beyond the domain of software per se. That the fundamental characteristic of a product is that with 10 people you can deal with 10,000 customers, but if you are in service, for example, if I'm giving haircuts, 10 people cannot give haircuts to 10,000 people in a day, but 10 people can sell 10,000 bars of soap, for example, right? So we were very clear that we wanted to be in this business of a product, and therefore we used to give services free, so that we don't get tempted to be distracted into the revenue stream of services and lose the capability to scale out products. So I think that was a fundamental insight that we were very lucky to have very early on. And again, I go back to this point that why I feel good about it is that we were doing it when we couldn't afford not to take that money. I mean, the money was available. People used to offer it to us and we have spent days and nights giving services to people completely free. Today, we are a 34-year-old software company. We have got close to 2 million users. I've got some users who have purchased software from us 25 years ago, paid us that one time, never taken an upgrade, and continue to get free service.
Wow, that's quite noteworthy, actually. But then when you choose to become a products company, and I'm sure this question is topmost on quite a few people's minds, how do you battle piracy? So that's the topmost. We all know people who've got a floppy disk of Tally, which was not actually Tally, and so on.
No, it was actually Tally. It was not paid for Tally.
It was not paid for. Different. It was Tally, but it wasn't licensed. So any lessons that you learned along the way about piracy and how you...
Yeah, I think most people don't really resonate with the way we think about that subject, honestly. So first, this point which I made, that someone who had paid me 25 years ago continues to get free service, I should probably extend that point to say that any user of Tally, whether they have paid us or not, they call our service center and they call it toll-free and they get service. So pirated users also get service, free. Oh. Right? And I don't think many people resonate with what we do and why we do. So the first thing which used to happen even in the early days, and this was a statement again made by father, was he would ask this question. I mean, right now, most of the audience here are Indians. And the question to ask each of you is that because you are an Indian, do you feel like a thief? Do you think you are a thief? The answer is no, right? And the problem is that it has been imposed upon us that there seems to be something weak about the Indian moral fiber, which is what causes piracy. And therefore, people who use pirated software are thieves, and that's the whole Western statement of the Western software companies, which got imposed on the software industry. And the basic reality is that, yes, first, people are not thieves. And second, the country is an underserved country. It's a little dark, and perhaps today's life is a little different, but still I would like to, if people don't mind, I would just like a small show of hands. If I took out 15,000 rupees from my pocket right now and gave it in your hands and told you that Monday morning by 10:30, please get me a licensed version of Microsoft Word or licensed version of AutoCAD, will you know where to go and buy it? Do you know where to go and buy it? How many hands can we see? 1, 2,
Yeah, just three.
3, 4, 5,
4.
right? And this is a modern world. When you don't even know where you will go and buy software, where is the question of saying that you have got legal software? Okay? So the problem is not the problem of the user, it's the problem of the supplier. Do we have a convenient enough way for people to buy? If we don't have a convenient enough way for people to buy, I'm happy that at least they're using it. Okay? And as we kept making it more and more convenient, our sales kept going up, because no one wants not to pay. They just don't know where to pay and whom to pay, honestly.
So a fairly generous view that your company has taken. You're right, it's not in consonance with the rest of the software industry. Just before I get on to the next question, I'd like to request the volunteers to hand out the tokens. If anyone who has questions can just raise their hands, and by show of hands, you'll be given a token by the volunteers, and I'll call out the token number just after we finish this tete-a-tete. So please raise your hands, and the volunteers are watching, and they'll come to you with a token. Thank you. So, I heard you mention, Bharat, that you could have charged extra for a GST module, etc. And now we'll just move a little away from Tally itself. And because you're in touch with more than 2 million SME users, small and medium enterprise users, and obviously the virus has not been very good to them, to any of the SME users. We are in a pandemic, and there is a downturn of some sort. And that's the first problem. The second is that the GST regime that was brought in, it's quite clear that there have been some missteps along the way, the right direction perhaps, but some missteps. And you're closest to that community. So what's your view on GST, what's going on in the nation, especially in the SME segment, topical because of COVID?
Yeah, so again, I've been very fortunate to be in very close quarters to watch the thought processes as the various tax regimes have emerged in the country. And honestly, yes, GST was, from a thought process perspective, a step in the right direction. See, many people don't understand and don't really go into the depth of the taxation system per se. So the concept of tax itself is that it is an involuntary contribution of one individual. So the important term is that it's an involuntary contribution of an individual for the benefit of the community. Right? So that's what a tax is. The very fact that it is involuntary automatically requires that there be enforcement. See, when something is voluntary, then that's the end of it. But when it's involuntary, there is a need for compliance. This whole concept of compliance comes because it's an involuntary frame. Now, for a variety of reasons, over a period of time, the trust deficit between what you will call the government and the citizen has been continuously increasing. So very recently, 3 or 4 years ago, before Mr. Anant Kumar, the MP, passed away, I was on a podium with him when I had brought up the subject that what can we do? Can we bring the word trust back into our dictionary? So just think about it. All of us who are not in politics, when we are sitting and talking together, we talk about politicians as rascals. And when you take the government, the bureaucracy and the government, they talk about the businessmen as rascals. Right? And we are really from the same fabric, right? It is people from my families, your families who are in the bureaucracy, and there are people in the bureaucrats' families who are in business. But when you are in your group as a businessman, they are rascals, and when they are talking, we are rascals. So what tends to happen is that instead of trying to make the process of compliance simple, the process of compliance is attempted to be made watertight. And that's a downward spiral for 2 or 3 reasons. One downward spiral is that if the cost of compliance or the effort of compliance is harder than evading it, and it seems possible to evade it, you not only save money, you also save the effort. Right? And so therefore it increases evasion. And then it cycles back into making that regime more and more strict, and that cycles back to further evasion. Okay. So that's the logjam that we are in, honestly. Right. And GST was a step to try and unlock that. But unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, both technical as well as the democratic process of decision-making, as you could call it, prevented that from coming alive completely. I am still very optimistic and hopeful that in the next couple of years, some steps will make it come alive. And if it does become as simple as it was originally planned to be, it can become an extraordinary economy booster, Right. So to fully go into details will take the rest of the night.
Sure. Understand. And I asked you this question specifically because you were part of the GST Advisory Council.
Not really advisory council. I was just fortunate to be part of part of many conversations when the whole shaping was taking place.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And have we got the volunteers? Have we got the questions and the tokens around? Sure. So do we have mics, or should I just, should we get this mic up and... So can we pass this mic around, please, for the questions, and Bharat will directly address those questions.
Yeah, Bharat, I'm Wing Commander Bhatt, Kiran Bhatt, 66 Pope.
Okay.
A great lecture.
Thank you.
And like you, HC, I was there when Reverend Thomas, and I also had these problems with studies, and finally went to the National Defense Academy. Now, my question is, in the Air Force, we used to say man-machine environment. You covered the man, you called the machine, your software. But my main doubt is about the environment. Now, in 1991, we took our gold by ARC aircraft and surrendered it in courtesy Narasimha Rao, and then moved ahead.
Yeah.
But the control from Bretton Woods of the West or whatever, financial, still exists.
Yes.
Now, on the one hand, like even my brothers, who was 63 Cottons, has faced this small-scale industry in depth, and through him I learned a lot. It was always a stifling environment. Now, when you look at USA, right, from Benjamin Franklin down, they have created an environment like that. And now what they're talking about latest is that, okay, we'll follow the third way book of Tengadi in terms of economic policy and move ahead. I would like you to comment on, say, the environment that was here in India, and if you went abroad, the changes and the benefits, the pluses and the minuses. Thank you.
I may not be fully qualified to give a proper answer, honestly. Yet, I will give some perspective which I have had. You see, in India, we have grown with a mindset which we call the savings mindset. It's not really just a savings mindset. So in the Mahabharata, there is a line where Yakshiraj asks Yudhishthir that dukhi kaun hai, who's the unhappy man? And the answer is कि जो ऋणी है, the person who owes money, that being in debt is considered anathema. And in contrast, if you see the capitalistic frame of the West, being in debt was never an anathema. So it allows you to think in particular ways. It allows you to look at money in a particular way and access it in a particular way and deal with it in a particular way. And when you are brought up in a culture where being in debt is considered very, very negative, and acknowledging being in debt is considered very negative, the way you think about life itself and the way you think about taking decisions is very different. So now, with the world flattening out and the cultures exchanging, you can see shadows of the way we used to think getting reflected in the West, and shadows of the way the West thinks getting reflected in the new generations of the country. So how the amalgamation will pan out, I don't want to honestly make a prediction, but I just wanted to give a perspective about what I feel has been the root cause of this phenomena that we have all gone through in our generation. I don't know if it resonates with you.
No, I think that's wonderful, Bharat. You have hit the nail on the dot. I think that is a unique thing that we have to think about. Because there it's a credit card philosophy. Like my brother in USA once said, that even if you don't have, if your mortgage, etc., the fellow will come to you and give you a credit card. So thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Token number 2, please. Could we have the mic passed on?
Good evening, sir. I'm Krishna Ol Katonian, 83 batch, Pakenham Walsh. It's a very inspiring story to hear from you. So I have got a couple of questions. First is, being a very old software company, there must have been a lot of temptations to being acquired by someone bigger or for you to expand. And also, your perspective of, the world, the globalization of the world versus, what is your internal philosophy about this? I would like to hear it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, it's not really temptation of getting acquired. Have we been sought for acquisition? We have been sought for acquisition from very, very early on. In the very early days, Tata's had come out with a competing product called EX, and then their director had called us to say if they can buy us out. And we have had conversations multiple times with various people. So it's not about not being tempted, but it has always been about that we are a potentially juicy target to acquire because we are a profitable product company and therefore it's a good acquisition target. Yet people don't believe in the same future that we are working for. So the reason why they want to talk to us is because of the kind of future we paint. But when it comes to valuing you as a company, then it is always that future is not possible. And from our perspective, look, if the future is not possible in your eyes, and it is possible in my eyes, then let me do it on my own. Right? So that's really no great mystery about it. It's just that we have never aligned to the same future or the same confidence about the future with any of the desiring investors. And so we will perpetually continue to have talks because talking doesn't cost anything, right? It's fair. From a globalization perspective, so we have had some good attempts abroad. We have had some really disastrous attempts abroad. And we continue to believe that in the next several years, we will be one of the most dominant players in the world. That's what keeps us going to the office every morning, at least for both the children, at least that's what they are doing. I've gone back into my shell, into my programming zone. But that's why I get up and program every morning, because that's what we want to do. So we actually have never, ever really limited ourselves to the, what you would call the administrative boundary called a country. Because these are artificial boundaries, right? It's one world, it's one humanity, it's one community. And we create these various boundaries for us to deal with this mass. So we never, throughout, we have never really isolated ourselves in terms of these boundaries. But it is just about being able to scale. And you have some administrative limitations and how much can you scale. And we are in the process of trying to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Question here, please. Token number 3.
So I'm Manav Nagaraj, IIC 94.
Great.
So my question is, what and how are you able to pass on the philosophies that you so steadfastly stand for down to the rest of the employees within the organization? Because the motivation for you to turn down the 200-300 crore that you could have got during the GST may not be the same for good talent to just walk across the door to the next product company for 2,000 or 3,000 rupees more a month.
Yeah.
So, and every organization is as good as the last person in the organization.
Very
so
true.
how are you able to, pass on and imbibe your values and your philosophy to every last person within the organization? Thank you.
Yeah. I wish one could claim credit for it. I must give credit to the fact that people have been wanting to do it. See, generally what tends to happen, I find that we all want to do it. It is just that we get trained not to do it. It is very rare that people don't want to do it. But we just get socially trained not to do it. We are told, that you are in a business. In a business, these things don't work. Or you have to look out for yourself, and you get socially trained to think in those terms. So when you are given an environment where you are encouraged to do it, and you had always wanted to do it, you just go ahead and do it. I'll take one example from a company that there was one salesman who had got an order from a government agency for under the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan SSA program, and they had sold 550 copies of Tally for the school education, and the entire order was worth about 2 crores, and it had come in the first week of March, which was for us the year ending, and therefore it was a very large order for us. And a day later, he discovered that the school actually had they had 50 schools, and they were intending to have 10 students per school. And they wrongly thought that they require 550 copies of Tally when they actually required only 50 copies of Tally. It took him 1 week to get that order changed and drop it down to 50 copies. Because the secretary told, look, it's the end of the year, my budget has to close, I've already released the order, I've already done this. And it was not something that I had to tell that person to do. It was not something that someone else in the company had to tell him to do. He was very clear that this buyer requires only 50 copies. They have wrongly placed an order of 550. And he got it cancelled. And he converted it into 50. And you feel proud of those moments that he lost his commission, right? Because he's working on, he's a salesperson. But that's what he did. So people just want to do it.
Thank you. We do have quite a few questions coming in online as well. I'll just take a couple, and then we'll go back to the audience here. There's an interesting question here which says, most people's professional journeys are marked by a few defining moments. What would you say were the 2 or 3 defining moments for you and Tally?
Oh, I wish there were 2 or 3 defining moments. I think there are defining moments almost every month. Very honestly, very, very difficult to come up with. So there I will take two defining moments at least then. One is, of course, the most talked about moment in Tally itself, when the first demonstration of Tally was given to my father. And which led to the creation of the codeless accounting system, because when I was giving him the demo and I entered on the screen T001, and he asked me the question, what is T001? And I said, it stands for traveling expenses. I said, well, enter traveling expenses. He said, no, computers don't understand English. And he stopped me, saying that I don't understand you. You told me that computers don't understand anything. So where's the question of English or non-English? My response to him had been that it is easier to write a program which understands codes than to write a program which understands English. And that one defining moment was his statement that, are you writing programs to make life of the programmer easier or life of the user easier? I think that philosophy has stayed with us for years together. The second one I would say is that when we barely had 2,000, 3,000 customers, perhaps even less, he made a statement which we laughed about for years together later. He said that there are only two types of businesses: those who use Tally and those who will use Tally.
Amazing.
And we laughed about it for years, saying that, why did you say those words? Why did you not say that there are only two types of businesses: those who have bought Tally and those who will buy Tally? Because the use part we had covered. More than 95% of the country was using Tally. A fraction of them had paid us. So, but we are still on the journey. We are still on the journey. We are still looking at the world as just two types of businesses.
That actually covers the second question, which there was a follow-on question, and I think you've covered that. So, token number 5 from the audience, please.
I have 4.
Token number 4, sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for, I didn't quite know what to
sorry.
expect when I came, so this has been a really lovely evening. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
thank you.
The question I have is, sure, my name is Aarti Munkur, I'm a lawyer. Could you tell us what sort of corporate social responsibility endeavors Tally is interested in, and how that ties in with the philosophy of the company?
Is it the right person to talk about it? Are them? They are spearheading everything. Can you please?
Yeah, I can.
Hi, I'm Nupur, Bharat's daughter. So I guess to just answer the question a little bit, a summary would be, we've not called it corporate social responsibility for a very long time, considering the legal aspect of it. I think that we have been doing what we can for society, I think in many ways, as far back as I know of before I even joined the company. Including from the education sector to just people that we know of. In the last few years, we have tried to make it a little more structured. So I think right now we realize that there's so much to do that we've tried to narrow it down to 2 or 3 general topics. So last year, we focused a lot on animal welfare. That was my personal passion. We focused a lot on women empowerment, on education. That's from my mom's side. This year, of course, from April onwards, a lot of our efforts have gone majorly into supporting the community because of the pandemic. So we've directed 95% of our funding into the low-income sector, trying to support continuing education, continuing healthcare, continuing everything from jobs, job availability. So that's what we're trying to do, and we'll continue to try and do that. I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nupur. We have a question from, this is a special one actually. We have a question from Jairaj Daniel, your classmate and former KST trustee. Says, Bharat, I enjoyed your brief talk this evening. My question to you would have been, what in your view and based on your personal own personal journey is the great moral, ethical, imperative challenge of the day as an individual, a business, and a nation. So he's outlined all three. As an individual is one, a business is second, and a nation is third. Should I repeat that?
Trust him to ask that. So, Jairaj, if you are listening, boy, you owe me one now. So, I'd like to quote a former dean of Kellogg College, Professor Deepak Jain, who incidentally one became fairly close to. And I had asked him this question about how he's seeing the changes of the students. And he made a very interesting point. He said that a few years ago, when you used to talk about students and their aspirations, they were always expressed in terms of what you would call success, and you can say it was codified as material success. And he said that the students of today, they talk about success in terms of significance to the world. That are they doing something which is significant rather than are they doing something which is successful? That I think personally has been for me a very insightful statement which I had been observing around me, but I was never able to put it into the same words that he did. How that connects is that personally I don't think the world is facing a moral or ethical challenge. I think our generation faced it. See, our generation faced it for a variety of reasons. We were the third generation after independence. And why that is particularly important is that barely 3 generations ago, it was patriotic to be against the nation, against the rulers of the nation, right? In fact, many of us, of my generation and who will be present here, would have grown up being told that behave yourself, otherwise we'll call the police. The police is supposed to be a friend, right? But we grew up being anti-police. Right? The point I'm making is that because of the environment that you grow up in, your thought processes are shaped in a particular way, and therefore you think about achieving in a particular way. And therefore the moral and ethical dilemmas that you have also are shaped because of that. You know, what you are treating as good and what you are treating as bad. And therefore you still do the bad because you feel that if you don't, you will be deprived. You know, so that's the dilemma that you get into. But the newer generation is definitely far more morally aligned than we used to be, far more ethically aligned than we used to be. Right? So personally, I don't think people are facing a dilemma in the individual space. In the business space, I will make a statement that people need to recalibrate their compass. See, it's a very short life, and I'm not saying that because I'm 60. Right? See, when you look ahead, if you look forward for the next 1 year, if someone tells you that COVID will last another 1 year or even another 6 months, it seems such a long time. My God, how will we survive for another 6 months? But the last 6 months have gone away in a jiffy. The last 20 years have gone away in a jiffy. So life is very short. So in that short life, are you going to enjoy yourself, or are you going to remain bitter? See, when you are not morally aligned, when you are not ethically aligned, it is not that you cause bitterness outside. You cause bitterness inside you because you are perpetually fighting with yourself. And then in this short life, what have you achieved? So business dilemmas, I believe, continues to exist, and they are very easily overcome. I would like to say that Tally is one of the examples of saying that, See, when I almost drove the company to bankruptcy. People could make a statement that the reason why the company is almost close to bankruptcy is because you did these foolish policies. Now, these foolish policies were that even when we were bleeding, we were giving raise to our employees, saying that, look, my employees cannot suffer. The cost of living is going up. I can't tell them that I'm not going to give you a raise because the company is having a loss. Yeah, so people could give you all that nonsense, honestly. Yeah. But at the end of it, everything is worth it.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We have time just for 2 questions. We'll have to cut off the audience here at token number 5. Sorry, token number 6 onwards. And then there's 1 question online. We'll have time just for 2 questions. Token number 5, please.
Sorry if I'm taking too long to answer questions.
No, please. Everyone, they're here to listen to you.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Simon Vargas. I'm the principal from the National School of Journalism. Thank you so much, sir. I really enjoyed the evening. Thank you so much for being so frank about your life. I've rarely heard someone who's so forthcoming and really acknowledging the mistakes that you made. I just want to know, many times what happens is, as a society, as individuals, we always resist change. And especially spoke about compliance and GST, and we had all those difficulties. Could you just tell us what is your philosophy in your company? How do you take your team along when you want to make a change, and how do you sort of bring a consensus? Thank you.
Yeah, I think what really helps, honestly, is when you are able to share the rationale of the way you think, right? And therefore what you want to do. So and of course sometimes some people do get irritated that you want them to do something and you are giving them almost a 2-hour explanation about why that something needs to be done, and they are saying, just tell us to do it and we'll do it. But I normally find that if you are able to connect things down to fundamentals. I took an example of saying that why we behave in a particular way is because of the fundamental belief that we have is if I do good for you, whatever you do will be good for me. Now, if I can connect any decision to one of these philosophies, then it stops becoming a question as to why should we do it or why should we not do it. However, if you word it slightly differently, so let me take an example. I can ask you to say, tell me how to save tax. And you will come up with a set of options for me. But if I put this statement to you, tell me that I don't want to avoid a tax. I want to pay the right tax. But tell me, what is the right tax to pay, which is lower than another option? You will think in a different way. See, saving tax makes you think in one particular way. Optimizing tax makes you think in a particular way. So it first starts with what is the core philosophy against which you want to make the statement. And the statement is that if I cheat the government of 1 lakh rupees, it's a small percentage, right? It's a small percentage, but it's a large percentage, small percentage for the government, but large percentage for me. So you can say that I have cheated the government of 5% of what I could, of my income. And in return, if the government cheats me of 5% of their income, I'm gone. So I would prefer never to allow that thing to come alive. I don't know if I'm helping answer, but I keep saying that we are a philosophy-driven company, so we tend to connect everything down to fundamentals of philosophy.
Thank you so much. In fact, the next question, and that's the last one, sorry, we're getting a lot of questions online as well. But this is the last one. It's from Shruti Puria, Bishop Cotton Girls' School, ISC 2006. in today's, and it's tied to the previous bit, but more about what Tally is doing for that. So in today's regulatory environment, where there is so much emphasis on corporate governance and financial controls, is Tally taking steps to update its software to bring in checks and controls for financial reporting?
I think this has been one of the most controversial subjects as far as the company is concerned. See, we are not the nation's moral keeper.
Yes.
We are a developer of a tool. We maintain our own morals, our own ethics. We create the best possible software which another businessman can use. And yes, another businessman can misuse. Okay? I mean, if any of us go to buy a knife for our kitchen, you will go and search for the sharpest knife because you want your work to be easy. You don't want to struggle to cut the tomatoes and the... But if you buy a sharp knife, you can kill someone with it. Okay? So you can go and ask the knife maker that why do you make such sharp knives? So are we bringing in greater financial control into our software so that people cannot do any hanky-panky? The answer is no. Does the software have sufficiency of capability that if a business wants to create controls, can they do it? The answer is yes. Right? So it's a very controversial subject, but we are very clear that we are never anyone's moral keepers.
Very well said. So you provide the tools for people to be compliant, but then the rest of it is left to their conscience, their choice, which is correct. That's all that we can do. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bharat. I'd just like to request C.N. Kumar, our executive patron, who's been, of course, a pillar for us at the Trust, one of the founding members of the Trust, to please come up and present Bharat with a token of our appreciation. Give it to him, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very enlightening lecture. I thought it came from your heart. And it's really touched a lot of us here. And I think you're also grounded a lot in more the Indian philosophy way of doing business rather than a very Western way of doing business. Congratulations on where you've come. I wish you and your family very well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.